Hi everyone. So the context for this week to really keep in mind is what we studied last week. At the beginning of chapter 12, God tells Abraham, "Go, I'm going to make you a great nation. You're my instrument to bring blessing to the world. Those who bless you, I will bless. Those who curse you, I will curse. And you will be a blessing to all the families of the earth." And then almost immediately, things take a turn. Let's dive in. Genesis 12, 6 through 13. Abram traveled through the land as far as the sacred place at Shechem, at the oak of Moreh. The Canaanites lived in the land at that time. The Lord appeared to Abram and said, "I give this land to your descendants." So Abram built an altar there to the Lord who appeared to him. From there he traveled toward the mountains east of Bethel and pitched his tent with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. There he built an altar to the Lord and worshipped in the Lord's name. Then Abram set out toward the arid southern plain, making and breaking camp as he went. When a famine struck the land, Abram went down toward Egypt to live as an immigrant, since the famine was so severe in the land. Just before he arrived in Egypt, he said to his wife Sarai, "I know you are a good-looking woman. When the Egyptians see you, they will say, 'This is his wife,' and they will kill me but let you live. So tell them you are my sister, so that they will treat me well for your sake, and I will survive because of you." Okay, so jumping right in, we just saw last week that this incredibly important, famous call from God in chapters 12, 1 through 5, where God says, "Go, I'm going to make you a great nation. I'm going to bless you. I'm going to take care of you. No one's going to curse you. You're going to be my instrument to bless the world." And it starts off, looks like, okay, Abraham's tracking. He's following God. Maybe God made the right choice, right? Abram is he makes it to Canaan. And the Lord appeared to him. "I give this land to your descendants." He built an altar to the Lord, and he begins to worship in the Lord's name. So it's all seems to be going well and good until a famine strikes. And the Lord had said, "I give this land to your descendants," but the first thing Abram does is run away from the land, this land of promise that God had promised to Abram and his descendants, and he goes to Egypt. And every time Egypt shows up in this story, it should pique our attention, especially if we know the later story, as anyone reading this story originally would have known, that the story of Israel was because of a famine, the sons of Israel end up in Egypt, ultimately as slaves in a foreign land, not in the promised land. And it took another 400 years for God to bring them back. Abraham seems to be foreshadowing that eventual moment. But here it at least raises the question, was he supposed to do that? Is there some sort of lack of trust here? God promised this land. He promised to take care of Abraham, to bless him greatly, to make his name great. And the first thing Abraham does is run to Egypt because the famine was so severe. And then it gets even worse. Just before they get to Egypt, he makes a plan with Sarai. "I know you are a good-looking woman. The Egyptians will want to kill me, but they'll let you live." What did God already promise? Again, let's see, do I have it right over here? God promised, "Those who curse you, I will curse." Abram, I'm going to take care of you. No one is going to harm you. And Abram here is saying, they're going to want to kill me because of you. So let's lie, and maybe they'll treat me well for your sake. And I think this is where the crux of the problem here. I will survive because of you. Abram, you're surviving because of God. God just promised, "I'm going to make your name great. I'm going to take care of you." And here you are saying, "Hey, maybe I'll survive because of my wife." Okay, so that's a problem. And as we didn't look at it, but you could keep going. What ensues is a bunch of trouble. Because of this kind of lack of trust, lack of faith in God's promises, what is created in Egypt in this moment is nothing but trouble and curse on the Egyptians. It's in verse 17 of this chapter. God actually sends plagues. He plagues the Egyptian king. Absolutely a precursor of what's going to happen in the book of Exodus. But this is all happening because Abram couldn't trust in God. And one, maybe he fled when he shouldn't have fled. And then two, he lied and wasn't willing to step in and trust that God can actually make him a blessing and not a curse. And so in this moment, because he didn't trust the Lord, he ends up being a curse to the Egyptians when he could have been a blessing. Well, it's either sad or we should be grateful that Abraham is just like us. As soon as God gives him this incredible calling, he seems to be falling over himself to mess the whole thing up. God wanted him to be a blessing, and instead he becomes a curse. He goes down to Egypt, and because of his fear, his lying, he's relying now on his wife Sarah instead of God to bless him, and he becomes a curse for Egypt. What does that mean for our life? How have we fallen short of God's great plan and purposes for us? And maybe there's a way to cling to the grace underneath this passage that God still reaches out to Abraham. He still has a purpose and a calling for Abraham, even in the midst of all of his failings. So maybe reflect on that this week.